Tomorrow I may. I was saying, uh-oh.
Even slightly a little bit late, and I hate that, but please, we're going to call the meeting to order. Thank you all for being here, and we will start with a roll call, please.
Councilmember Wellender,
Here.
Councilmember Dean,
Here.
Councilmember Farrar Rivas,
Here.
Mayor Lowe.
Here.
Thank you.
And please note our vice mayor is parts unknown. I understand he's in several different hemispheres at this moment. So we have public participation using Zoom and in person. We had a closed session. No action was taken. And would you please all rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag? Thank you. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We should have done that before the roll call, but, you know, it is what it is. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Ding to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, clerk will call the roll, please.
Councilmember Wellender,
Yes.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Councilmember Farrar Rivas,
Aye.
Mayor Lowe.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
Thank you. We now have comments from the public. You're You have 3 minutes to discuss or bring to our attention any item that is not on the agenda, and we'll open it at this time. Good evening.
Hi, hello City Council members. Where we all live in the city of Sonoma is located on the unceded ancestral lands of the Miwok people. The indigenous people of this place never legally relinquished their lands and were victims of genocide and enslavement at the hands of the Spanish, Mexican, and American governments and people. I believe that we should honor all of the ancestors and their descendants who are the original stewards of the land that was taken from them on which we meet today. What I've just said is a land acknowledgement statement. Out of respect for the original inhabitants of this place and in acknowledgement of the injustice that has been done to them in our occupying of this land, I would like to request that the City Council calendars discussion of considering beginning at least some of your meetings with such a land acknowledgement statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the public?
Robert Demler, First Street West, Sonoma. I debated whether to come tonight because I didn't think it was a very riveting agenda. Sorry. And this is not about the agenda, but I drove and I have to come around by Broadway because of the one-way intersection that I'm dealing with. And there was the palm tree with all those glorious lights. I want to thank the City Council. I was over discussing it with Tim Zoner last week, and he said you all had extended the time until April or something. So thank you very much. I would be happy if it were lighted or lit, whatever the verb is, all year round. And I would especially like, within my lifetime, and your time is growing shorter for that, because I would like to see the comparable palm tree on the north side lighted, and I was explaining all of the challenges about putting lights on it, but no challenge in Sonoma can go undealt with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Demler. Any other comments from the public? Any comments on Zoom? Okay, seeing no more public comments, public comment is now closed. We'll turn to meeting dedications, and I understand that Mr. Ding has a dedication for us this evening. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor Lo. Good evening, everyone. I would like to delegate out in the meeting to honor our lifetime Sonoma resident. His name is Ralph Kitchler. He died September the 8th. He was born September the 8th, 1925, died January 18th, 2023. A lifelong resident of Sonoma, Ralph, nickname is Bart Kitchler, is his family and with his family in January and then 18, 2023. He was 97 years old. He was born to Lucy and Joseph Kitchler at Bondale Hospital on September 8, 1925. A veteran of the World War II, he was a member of 75 Infantry Army Division. He fought in snow-covered Fox Hotel in the Arlington Forest in the Belgian Lexington during the World War II. He also delighted his grandkids with a historical story about numerous business and the buildings about his hometown. Before there were many and spotlights after the way he worked in the construction industry in the Bay Area. His service will be held in March 31st, 2023. And in the donations, I encourage the contact with the fire volunteer and the district. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're happy to dedicate to the memory of Mr. Kiekler. Thank you for bringing that up. Are there any further dedications? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is council member reports and comments. I'll start with Mr. Ding again. Do you have any report or comment to share with us?
I'm afraid not. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Ferrer-Rivas?
Yeah, I do have a committee report. I attended the Sonoma Clean Power Authority Board of Directors meeting on Thursday, February 2nd, where they elected a new chair, Deborah Fudge, who's a council person from Windsor, and then the vice chair would be Linda Hopkins with the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors. There is the major emphasis of the meeting was going over their budget, their annual report, which is out and that you can find on the Sonoma Clean Power Authority website. And also, I think one of the things that they mentioned at the meeting was that with so many PG&E bills going up, people often kind of get confused and think that Sonoma Clean Power is responsible for PG&E bills going up, when in reality, that's PG&E and not Sonoma Clean Power. But one of the things that they said that they've gotten great response from people because they actually get on the phone with people and help them and direct them to other savings that they may be able to get. So it was a good meeting overall. It was my first one there, so I was basically listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for attending that. That's very important. Mr. Willander?
Yes. I had an opportunity back on Friday, the 3rd of February, to attend the North Bay Watershed Association meeting on Zoom. And although, likewise, it was my first time with this meeting, I sat and listened. I took some notes, but the biggest takeaway that I had was that with the recent rains, we are not in great condition. We are in good condition, getting better, and that it was encouraging to know that we still need to identify water as a precious resource. I was encouraged by the fact that we may not be in as a deep drought in this 2023. So that was my takeaway that I took with a smile.
Thank you. I have a couple of things to report, and of course, the first one I have to report is look around you. You'll see that the City Council Chambers now has art from our local artists. And Pat, if you wouldn't mind just coming forward for a moment, I'd like to recognize you. Pat Meyer Johnson is the artist behind these beautiful impressionist paintings of the images of Sonoma, and was the 2022 Sonoma Treasure. I initiated this year of art in when I spoke at the museum last week at the Meet the Mayor event with the Chamber of Commerce, and I had asked Pat, as the local treasurer, if she would be so kind as to be our first exhibit. And so thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you to the staff for coming in and hanging the paintings. And I hope you all enjoy them and you encourage people to come in. We'll try to figure out some hours where people can come in and see them. And thank you, Pat. It's just beautiful. I took pictures, I sent them to people, and it's so nice to look out from here and see your work. And we will look forward to, as the months go by, more from the commission. Thanks again, Pat, for doing that. So, yes, a little applause for Pat, for sure. So that's one thing. So last Thursday, we had the, as I said, the Meet the Mayor event, and we held it at the museum. And it was very well attended. It was a wonderful event. Our new alcalde was there, Mr. Lynch, the Sonoma Treasurer for 2023, Jamie Love, was there. It was a great event, and I want to thank the Chamber for doing such a nice job on that. As far as committees go, my plate got a bit fuller. In addition to serving on the Sonoma County Transportation Authority, I'm now on their executive board. They wanted to have, thanks to Councilman Rogers from Santa Rosa, who is the chair, he wanted to have someone whose city is not on 101. Well, guess who that is? And so, so me and Sebastopol did Rochambeau. No, that's not true. I was nominated. So anyway, so I'll be serving on the executive board of Sonoma County Transportation Authority. We talked about some projects, and one just to bring to your attention is there will be a roundabout at 116 and 121 where Bono's station is. And that will be going in fairly soon. I also was elected by my peers in the other cities to LAFCO, which is the Local Agency Formation Commission, a very powerful committee in Sonoma County that looks at annexations and districts and so forth. And I was told by one of our planning commissioners, as a matter of fact, that we haven't had anyone from Sonoma Valley on LAFCO since Valerie Brown was a city councilwoman. All of you don't probably even know who she is, but this was over 20 years ago. So Sonoma now has a representative on the executive board of the Transportation Authority and on LAFCO, and my calendar has gotten crazy, but I'm very proud to be able to represent this city on those important commissions, because there's a lot at stake for us, and sometimes people forget about us up here or down here, depending which way your perspective is. So I want to thank both those committees and my colleagues in other cities for allowing me to do this work. So that being said, and moving right along as I like to do, the city manager comments, please.
Mayor Lowe, did you want to
Oh.
play your message?
Oh, yes, thank you. I completely forgot it. Thank you so much for reminding me. So I was asked by the Sister City Association. They had a meeting with our sister city in Kanyev in the Ukraine, and it took place at midnight. And so they asked me if I wouldn't mind just recording a greeting for them. And they went through a whole sort of history of Sonoma. Jack London Park was very much involved. And it's 30 seconds, but I just wanted to share with you, mainly not because of what I said, because I want to shout out Sarah Tracy on our staff, who I swung by City Hall and I said, would somebody please help me record something? And she put this together in like 15 minutes, and I just want to shout her out. So here we go. Play it. It's only 30 seconds.
Okay, no.
Bottom left.
Oh.
Giving you greetings and congratulations on your event. We are strongly supporting our sister city, Kanyev, in the Ukraine, and we'll do everything we can to help everyone in Ukraine have a peaceful and strong outcome. Good luck to you. Please come visit us in Sonoma. We look forward to visiting you as well. Slava Ukraini. That's it. Okay.
That's great.
Anyway, they loved it. So it was, the first part is basically here I am and here you are and congratulations. So anyway, thank you. But didn't Sarah do a nice job putting that together just really quickly, and she, put in the flags and everything and the titles, and I just want to thank her so much for doing that. Anyway, now we will move on to, thank you for reminding me, Madam Clerk, thank you. So, city manager report, please.
Yeah, it's also, I want to acknowledge staff. When the mayor said we were going to put this art up, we were excited to do it, but it takes some work. And I want to acknowledge our clerk, Rebecca Barr, who kind of led that effort, as well as Anthony Navarov and Nestor Polito from Public Works, who all were involved in making sure that this got up here. And Sarah and I are talking about how we can have some public display, because we just don't have a public display without somebody here. So we're working on that, and we'll try to make sure that happens. So just want to acknowledge those staff as my report.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you acknowledging them because, in a matter of minutes, I basically asked the staff to please turn into art dealers and art whatever, and they did it, and it was great. So thank you so much. Any comments from our city attorney?
I don't believe we discussed this at the last meeting, but I just wanted to inform the council, if it hadn't already heard, that the Business Roundtable statewide initiative did receive sufficient signatures to be placed on the ballot in November 2024. That's the so-called Taxpayer Protection Act, which would make raising local government revenue extremely difficult. You probably received some information from Cal Cities, but I know it's of interest, so I wanted to highlight it as well.
Thank you. Yes, we learned a lot about it at the conference. Great. Anything else? Okay, we have no presentations tonight. We're at the consent calendar. First, before we, let's entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar, then I'll ask for public comment.
Is it possible I'd like to pull a couple items for discussion, please?
Absolutely.
Item 7.3 on the expenditures, I just have a few questions.
Okay.
And I would like to hear a little bit more detail about the success of the bridge on Friar Creek at 7.4. Just those two, please.
7.3 and 7.4 have been pulled. Are there any other pulls? No. Okay. Let's take public comments since I see someone, and then we'll move to a motion.
Hi, Matt Metzler, 1110 Friar Creek Drive. I just wanted to make a comment about item 7.2 about the short-term parking drop-off zone. And I just want everybody to be aware of the fact that right now, most of Broadway serves as a short-term parking drop-off zone because frequently I have been bicycling on the bike lane that the city established on Broadway, and cars park in the bike lane, especially right over here. I love Deli Belly, my favorite Indian restaurant, but people park in the bike lane to pick up to-go food items. And when this has happened, it actually has happened during the farmers market, and the police officers were present at the farmers market, and I asked them if they would enforce the bike lane and cite the car that's parked in the bike lane or tell them to move, and they said no, they do not have the jurisdiction and they do not have enforcement powers to get people to not park in the bike lane. So I think this is something the City Council should consider for the future to provide direction to the police department for enforcing, preventing people from parking in the bike lane. Because, if there's no enforcement, that means the bike lane does become de facto short-term parking drop-off. So, it's happened twice where cars been parked there, and the officer just told me they can't enforce that. And so I just thought I should bring that to the council's attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler. Are there any other comments regarding the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, so items 7.3 and 7.4 are pulled. I'll entertain a motion to approve 7.1, 7.2, 7.5, 7.6, 7.7, and 7.8.
So moved.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved in second to approve the so named items. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, clerk will call the roll, please.
Councilmember Wellender?
Aye.
Councilmember Dean?
Aye.
Councilmember Farrar Rivas?
Aye.
Mayor Lowe?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
Thank you. We are now on item 7.3, which has been pulled, which is to accept the expenditure report for the month of January. And we have a staff report, I believe, so please proceed. Thank you with the staff report, and then we'll ask questions. Or would you just prefer that we have the question asked so that you can direct that? Very good. Mr. Wellender, your question.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with the acronym of, what was it? Was it NR something or other reimbursement? Now I'm drawing a blank. It might been, well, let me go on to my next one. The dog waste depot supplies, $4,600. Is that for the little blue bags that we pick up, leftovers? That's, I'm sorry, item number 1020 or 10,020.
Let's see. What vendor?
Vendor is the dog waste depot.
I believe that it is all of the bags.
And I'm just curious, is that a year's supply, 6 months supply, or?
We buy them as needed, so
Okay.
I'm not quite sure when we last
Okay.
got them. I can find out for you.
No problem. I was curious then on the second page, again, the GHD engineering services for 17,000. Was that, I was just curious on what that was.
I don't have the detail on that one. Do you by chance know, Mike? Or the GHD?
Engineering services for
expenses?
$17,000, what project that may have been associated with.
Does it have any more detail for which one it is?
No.
And these aren't,
January.
I can get the information brought back. This is not a game
Okay.
changer. I'm just needing to get educated.
So we have a number of projects. So the 17 is the total. I'm spitballing a little bit, but they would be currently, we have them working on the Depot Park path. So that, and they're working on our well one vault. I think that's the $11,000 one. And I think the $3,000 one is for our Depot path.
And this is design, engineering,
It's
design?
engineering, yeah, that we have our on-call contract with them for.
Okay.
They
Okay.
give us task orders and then they bill it against them.
Okay, great. And then just skipping on down to Mo Engineering, which was for $8,500. I'm guessing that's a similar on contract or?
Yeah, it's, but that's a pass-through, so that, and where's the total of it?
It's $8,529.
Is it broken down into different invoices? Yeah. So the 8181 is most likely for their services providing plan review for Hummingbird Cottages, the development going on.
Oh, so this was
Harvard
a plan, a third-party plan check?
Ave. It is, and it's a pass-through, so we bill the client. for
Right,
that.
right. Okay, so this is third-party, right. And the last one is just clarity on the expenditure for Page and Turnbull for their services. Is that the something update, historical? It was $2,600 for professional services planning.
That's for the update of our local historic inventory,
Okay.
the local sites and structures.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right. Any other further questions? Any questions or comments from the public regarding this item before I entertain a motion? Any on Zoom? All right, so I'll entertain a motion to approve item 7.3, the expenditure report for January.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the expenditure report for January.
Is there a second?
I second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Wellender,
Yes.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Councilmember Farrar Rivas,
Aye.
Mayor Lo.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
Thank you. We now are on item 7.4, which is to approve the notice of completion for the Friar Creek Pedestrian and Bicycle Bridge Project 1802, federal project number CML 5114020, etc. And is there a staff report, or do you have just a question, Mr. Wellender, with regards to this?
Well, I know this was a significant construction project and it was in my neighborhood, and I'm confessing that I have not walked on it yet. And it appears that it was successful and that it came in below budget. And so if that's the case, I'd like to publicly say thank you. But I would welcome any more comment about the project that might enlighten the council.
Okay, Mr. Berger, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little, quick comment regarding the Friar Creek project.
My pleasure. This project was in motion when I got here. We had to go in and do advanced tree trimming and some other work to get the right-of-way cleared of potential bird nests, things like that. And we got started again when we had the opportunity to go into the creek and actually do work. Department of Fish and Wildlife prohibits contractors from going in June and July, depending on the body of water. That was part of the project that I got rolling on. We had a full construction management service providing full-time construction inspection and resident engineering services for this. So we had an outside consultant working on the project. I'm still waiting for that perfect project that doesn't have a hiccup or a problem on the way. This one had a couple of problems. We had an issue trying to locate the 12 kV underground PG&E line, electric line that goes right underneath where our piles were going to be driven. And this was one of those things that it was going to be really tough to handle during construction. So when we did look for it, we did not locate it. And so its exact location was TBD, and we had to put screw-in piles in underneath that abutment. And so coming up with a plan acceptable by PG&E that we could facilitate construction of out in the field was a big challenge on the job. After that happened, it was pretty much all downhill, and which was great. And we were able to complete all the infrastructure work going up to the bridge, which included new approach sections of roadway concrete, including cast in place abutments at the bridge, railing, new street lights, and just working with all the neighbors and the neighborhood and keeping everybody on the same page. Dropping in the bridge went effortless that day, and then it was a matter of pouring the bridge deck. We got the bridge deck poured the day that we had the council retreat with the new council members at the hotel there on 2nd Street. And it's a great accomplishment. This one's been in the hopper in design and being talked about for a long time. And it's a great project to get behind us, and we're done. We have a few mop-ups to do. We still have to apply for reimbursement, and that's in the works for our grant money. And I believe that's in the neighborhood of $500,000. And the project did come in, as Councilmember Wellender stated, it was under budget and on time. So that's the way to go.
Under budget and on time. Happy Valentine's Day. It's just what we want to hear, right? Okay, any other questions for Mr. Berger, or comments or questions actually regarding this project? Mr. Ding.
I would like to say thank you. Thank you to everyone, your leadership, and all the staffs and that great effort. It brings another asset for our community. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and Mayor Ding, thank you for reminding me. I got to give credit to staff. Staff did an excellent job. Oriana was a project manager on this job, and we also got a lot of help from our team. Whenever we needed help, operations was out there. We called on them a couple of times to get things done. And that's one of the great parts is the contractor's really putting up a fuss, to get in and just cut a little piece off a tree. Ops can get out there and just get it done. So really good job internally, and the success of the project is a reflection of the staff.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right. Any comments from the public on this? Yes, please.
Hi, I didn't even know this was going to be on the agenda. Because I happen to live right around the corner, have been advocating this, just for those who are not aware, that this was first proposed in 2007 and was going to be constructed in 2011, but then we lost the redevelopment agency funds. Anyway, I just wanted to compliment the staff and the city, because living right around the corner, I don't know if it was the city or the contractor. Anyway, they were really good about they put notices on our door with their numbers. We were able to call them, email them. They kept us informed of what the progress was, and they just did an outstanding job of working with the neighbors in the community. And so I really appreciate it. So thank you very much to you guys did a good job. Whoever you hired for the contractors did an outstanding job of reaching out and keeping good communication with the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's always wonderful to hear. All right. Any comments on Zoom or questions?
No one's raising their hand.
All right. And so I'll turn this back to the council. Is there a motion to approve the notice of completion for Friar Creek Pedestrian and Bicycle Bridge Project 1802?
I move to approve.
Second by anyone?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Wellender. Any questions regarding the motion? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Wellender?
Yes.
Councilmember Dean?
Aye.
Councilmember Farrar Rivas?
Aye.
Mayor Lowe?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
Wonderful. And I'm glad you pulled that, because that was really nice to hear all those good things. And what a great outcome. Even though it started in 2007, apparently it was still on time. All right. Okay. So next is we have a public hearing. It is 6:37. I am 18.1. I'm going to open the public hearing on the discussion, consideration, and possible action to introduce an ordinance amending the Sonoma Municipal Code, amending Title 19, Section 19.10.020 B3 residential component, and Section 19.010.020 C2 residential component to the City of Sonoma Municipal Code, and finding this action is exempt from further environmental review under the general rule in California Environmental Quality Act CEQA Guidelines 15061B3. That CEQA only applies to projects that have the potential for causing significant effect on the environment. And I know that Ms. Tierney is the staff assigned to this, but first we need to introduce the ordinance, and then we'll take public comment. Or do we need to take public comment first? Ms. Tierney,
I think we'll start with the staff report.
please.
Acceptable? All right.
Okay.
Thank you. And I know this item has been before the City Council before. And I have a little bit of background for the new members of the council. So a lot of the zoning initiatives that we have been working on lately stem from SB 330, the Housing Crisis Act, which went into effect on January 1st, 2020. Long story short is our zoning code, and most zoning codes were filled with subjective standards that require discretionary interpretation of the standards. And per the Housing Crisis Act, we're no longer allowed to apply subjective standards to housing development projects. And so we've been working really hard over the last few years to clarify our standards and make it so that everybody has a very crystal clear understanding of what our development standards are. So I have a few examples of our code that has been updated. So language that would be considered subjective is should be compatible, low-key residential flavor, open space should be provided as continuous usable site elements. It really depends on how the reader is interpreting that. When replacement is necessary, substitution material should incorporate the color, design, and texture that conveys the visual appearance of the original material. So all of these standards could mean something different to me and to another member of the public. Here are some examples of objective standards. Minimum setbacks required for primary structures shall be 20 feet. Crystal clear. We'll all have the same understanding of what that means. Proposed structure shall not exceed maximum height of 30 feet, and so on and so forth. I hope that gives a clear idea of what we're trying to accomplish with these zoning code amendments. So the section that we're trying to tackle this evening is section 1910, zones and allowable uses. This is really the keystone of our zoning code. It lays out what is allowed in all of our zoning districts. And it establishes all of our zoning districts. We have residential, commercial, gateway commercial. And in our commercial and mixed-use zoning districts, there is a requirement for a residential component. This is not defined in our code. And it also includes subjective language. And so because of SB 330, we're here this evening to continue a year-long discussion of how to clarify this language and make it objective. So on the screen now is the existing language in our code. So so we have two different standards that are very similar for commercial and mixed-use zoning districts. For the commercial zoning district, the residential component states, in applications for new development on properties of 1/2 acre in size or larger, for which a discretionary permit is required, a residential component is required, unless waived by the Planning Commission. A residential component, and here's the very subjective language, should normally comprise at least 50% of the total proposed building area. And then there are circumstances listed in which the component may be reduced or waived. And I'd just like to draw your attention to a couple of the differences. The first is that the difference between commercial and mixed use is that for commercial, this applies to properties of 1/2 acre in size or larger, and that is different for mixed use. And then the subjective language is that should normally comprise at least 50%, and then we do not currently have a definition for building area. So I'm going to skip these next few slides and just give you a brief summary. I tried to put detail in and how much work has gone into the draft that is before you. So we started in February of 2020 and worked extensively with the Planning Commission. The first version that was brought to City Council in April of 2022 included a whole suite of options. It was a very robust attempt at addressing this issue. It was bounced back to the Planning Commission, and we've been going through a series of meetings with the Planning Commission, with small ad hoc groups trying to address this issue. It's been very challenging, and a lot of thought and a lot of work has gone into it. And where we are today is hoping to make a modest change that will clarify the subjective language, and address the issue in more detail through our general plan process. And so where we were ending up is that a lot of the changes would have required CEQA review and are changing our zoning districts. And all the intention with doing infill development is wonderful, but we can't propose an ordinance that is not compliant with our general plan. And so fortunately that process is moving forward. But in the meantime, we want to do a cleanup that is as focused and clean as possible now, and then we'll dig into the density issues later on through the general plan process. And so the ordinance is before City Council this evening. It was unanimously recommended, I believe it was unanimously recommended. No, 4-1. 4-1 by Planning Commission, and so the introduction would be this evening and tentatively scheduled to adopt the ordinance on March 1st. That concludes my presentation.
And thank you for the presentation. And before we take public comment, are there any questions of staff regarding the report before we make comments or have public comment? Yes, Mr. Wellinger, please.
Couple items. I believe you said you started in February of 2020, but it was 22, correct?
Thank you.
Okay. What Given where we're at with all the implications of SB 330, SB 9, all the alphabet soup from Sacramento, what is the urgency to make this change tonight?
The urgency is primarily to do with projects that are in the pipeline that are going to be coming before the Planning Commission and City Council in the next few months. And having the standards be crystal clear for everybody will definitely help facilitate that process to make sure that everyone understands what the requirement is.
Okay. So if we didn't have this to clean up right now and there was a project that came before Planning Commission, is it because it still has subjective language in it that we're struggling with?
So the subjective language isn't as big of a deal with a commercial project as it is for a housing development project. So for a housing development project, we would not be able to impose the standard. For a commercial project, what we're left with is where we've been, which is just very murky territory, where the interpretation might be different for the applicant versus the Planning Commission versus City Council.
So these percentages that are on the screen, those were percentages that were agreed upon by the Planning Commission in that 4-1 vote of January 19th?
Are you talking about the 100%?
Talking about the 100%, yes.
Yes. So there was substantial debate. So I can bring up the slides. So the current language states that the residential component should normally comprise at least 50% of the total proposed building area. So one of our recommended cleanups is to change the word building area to floor area. We have a very concrete definition for what floor area is. There was substantial debate at the Planning Commission about that 50% and whether the 50% should be, are we talking, if it's a full commercial project, is it just the commercial component or is it the whole project that's being proposed? And I can pull up the ordinance language. So what's being recommended, what was recommended by the Planning Commission was that the residential component shall be equal to 100% of the floor area of the commercial component. And so that's a change from the floor area in general and specifying it to the commercial component. So in this case, if we had 40,000 square feet of a commercial project, then the required residential component would be 40,000 square feet. Where previously, if we had a 40,000 square foot project, the required component would be 20,000 square feet.
Correct. So in essence, we have doubled the requirement on the commercial projects that once said, if you, as you're illustrated, if the client is proposing 40,000 square feet, then they are obligated to provide 20,000 housing. Now we're saying that whatever square footage we are proposing on the commercial side needs to be replicated on, means to be copied on the housing side.
That was the recommendation of the Planning Commission, and so correct. So if the build out of the site was 40,000 square feet, then the residential component would essentially be more than what would be allowed on that property.
And this is something that reflects, as you shared on the timeline, kind of the history of the ad hocs and previous planning commissioners and how this evolved.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a lot of debate about this issue at the Planning Commission, and the direction from the Planning Commission was that they wanted it to be discussed at City Council and have it be a decision at this level.
And I appreciate that, but I believe that this is a very complicated item. And that's why I asked specifically what the downside would be if we see, I'm of the opinion that I want to continue this because I do not feel comfortable based upon the, what is being proposed tonight. And I know, having been part of that historic debate going all the way back from day one, that where they have arrived was not my understanding of where they were going. So not to say they don't have that right because they dumped one of the planning commissioners in the past. I'm not arguing that, but what I am going to say is I feel uncomfortable having the four of us make that decision this evening with what I would say would be minimal background. No, that's not a criticism. It's just it's a complicated, because I think it's important that that council clearly understands what the implications are, and I think that justifies a little bit more discussion. As a result, I'll be suggesting that it be continued.
All right, well, we'll get to that. Right now, to that suggestion, but I want to make sure that we get our questions, and then we hear public comment, and then we'll bring it back to the council for how we want to dispose of this item. I don't mean dispose in any way. It's just, it's another word for deal with, right? All right, so Mr. Ding, I see your light is on.
All
Any
right.
questions
Yes.
at this point? Just questions
Just
of staff,
questions.
please.
I remember last year at this time, then I believe that February, we reviewed the resident components. And then we returned it back to the planning commission. The reason is we want to see more flexibility for the residential components. I know during the past year, you have been working on it and very hardly. I would like to know, could you please choose 3 major bigger changes, make an amendment? Just only 3. I know a bunch of it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the recommendations that was before City Council about a year ago, it was recommending a residential component plan. And so it would allow the developers to come before you with a suite of options that could be considered. And there were a lot of really wonderful components with that. I think there's a little bit of a discrepancy between what the Planning Commission really wants to see all the development be built on site, and what the residential component plan would have done was allow for off-site construction, which had some challenges in a bunch of different ways. Number one, from a CEQA perspective, if we have a project and we're evaluating a project at, 1 Sonoma Plaza, and they're proposing to build 40 units of housing somewhere else as part of the environmental review document, we have to look at those offsite impacts as well. And so it made it very challenging for staff to have to look at that. And another reason was if that site was already zoned for residential development, the intent is that it would already be accommodating those 40 units, so it wasn't really a fair swap. So it was kind of trying to take credit for residential development where residential development was already anticipated. And so some of those options have been dialed back. And the primary one that we're trying to move forward is to allow for the payment of a fee that would go into a fund to support housing development that would be controlled by the city. And then in the language before you, we also have exceptions, trying to kind of clarify the waiver process versus when the component is required. So in the current draft, the exceptions would be the replacement of a commercial use with an existing tenant space. So if we have a building that's already commercial and they're refurbishing it, trying to say that's, it's really the same thing. And then this exception for historic structures. So when we do our zoning code amendments, we really try to look at some real world examples. So a good example is when we did our multifamily design guidelines, we looked at the Alta Madrona apartments and said, this is an amazing example. This is what we want to see replicated throughout the city. And we use that to help craft our zoning ordinance. And so this exception for the historic structures is taken from a real world example. And they've been very public about it, so I'm not outing anyone, but the Sebastiani Theater has come in and they're proposing an expansion. And so with our existing code, they would be required to provide a residential component for their addition. And given that it's a nonprofit and it's a local historic building, they were not able to design their project to accommodate a residential component. And so this 30% was really designed to anticipate a project of that scale and to give the City Council flexibility and the Planning Commission flexibility that there might be some exceptions where we have historic structures and our hands are tied a little bit with building codes and things like that.
Thank you. You mentioned about the offset and the residential component, and also you mentioned about the fee structure. Do you have any guideline or any, the specific, the explanation, or are you based on case by case?
So the way that ordinance is drafted now is that it's up to the discretion of the Planning Commission to either require the construction on site or to consider approval of the fee. The fee would need to have a nexus study, and that work is in progress and is scheduled to return to the City Council for a study session sometime in March. So we don't have that fee in place now. That would need to be developed at a later time. What we're trying to do now is establish the framework and the language and make sure that City Council is comfortable with the idea and the concept. And then the rest of the work will be done at a later date.
Very clear. We are expecting a March. Thank you.
Ms. Ferrer Rivas, you have a question?
I think that my questions were just answered. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Ding.
I have a question regarding the off-site use in lieu. I understand that it's a little bit apples and oranges, and there's CEQA and whatever. But could you go into some detail why that was eliminated as an option?
I think the primary concern was stemming from the Planning Commission and the concept of no net loss. And so if we have a site that is already identified by our housing element as accommodating 100 units of housing, they were concerned about giving a developer credit for building those 100 units of housing and wanting to make sure that, you know, if you have to do 50 units of housing downtown and you're trying to take credit for 50 of those units, but the site is already designed and designated by the general plan and the zoning code to accommodate those units, they weren't seeing that as an apples to apples comparison. They were seeing it as kind of trying to take credit for future development that would already be planned for.
All right, I'll have comments regarding that. Any further questions of staff before I open it to the public, and then we'll bring it back for comments? All right, comments from the public, please, regarding this item.
Good evening, Mayor Lowe, members of the council. I'm Michael Woods. I'm an attorney here in town. My office is at 846 Broadway, and I'm here this evening representing Lat 33 Capital, which is the ownership entity for MacArthur Place Hotel and the property across the street at 870 Broadway. We've been participating in this process for the past year and a half. We are in support of staff's recommendation. We think that when the council considered this item before, as Councilmember Ding indicated, the council's direction to staff was to take it back to the Planning Commission and keep the council with a menu of options. You wanted flexibility. So if a project comes along that is deserving, that meets your policy objectives for the town, you could proceed with it and there'd be a framework for that project to move forward. We're interested in having certainty in the development code. We're interested in having certainty in the fee that would be imposed. We appreciate that staff is moving forward with the Nexus study in order to come up with a defensible fee, and we hope to come in with a development proposal once we have certainty on those issues. And we have other representatives from Lat 33 here this evening to introduce themselves to you. And I think first, Chad Parson, who's the CEO of Lat 33 Capital, is here. So I'll turn it over to Chad.
Thank you.
Hi. Thank you, Mayor. Nice to meet you and
Nice to meet
council. I just wanted to echo what Michael said. Thank Christina for all her hard work. I'm the CEO of Lat 33 Capital. We do own MacArthur Place and 870 Broadway. We've spent a considerable amount of time taking in community opinions and working in a collaborative way with Sonoma to try and clean up 870 Broadway and remediate that property. We bought the property really without having fully assessed all the environmental risks and so on. And we are now facing, lead, asbestos, chloroform, environmental issues. And I say that in a way that is not regretful, but in a way that also really asks for some movement forward on the ability for us to continue our remediation, clean up the property, and then develop it. I think the way the current law is constructed really presents us with extreme difficulty in doing so. The last process that we went through with 5 entitlements at MacArthur Place was an ad hoc process kind of caught us off guard. And what we'd like to see really going forward is a clear path for someone in our shoes who's really trying to do the right thing for the community and clean up an eyesore and a problem, quite frankly, that was going on for decades, so that we can put in place something that everybody in the community can be proud of. We've spent a lot of time and energy making MacArthur Place a world-class hotel. I hope you have a chance to go there and enjoy it, but we feel very proud of that achievement. We'd like to continue that, but in its current form, we think that the law is just very unclear, and we need certainty to be able to move forward economically, because we just don't know what the ultimate cost will be to take on projects such as this and complete it. So I think from a policy standpoint, it would be incredibly helpful for us to have some clear guidance as far as this ordinance is concerned, so that we can march it forward and hopefully construct something that, again, everyone's proud of. We want to support housing, obviously, and we are demonstrating that by our payment, obviously, in lieu on this current project that we have undertaken. So we want to continue to do that, but we would ask for clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Any comment on Zoom?
Yes, I'm going to be bringing in Caleb Weeks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Lowe, council members and staff. Callum Weeks here with Generation Housing. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment this evening. One of the things that I'm just a little bit worried about is, some comments here that would suggest we should delay this further, but we've been spending a year on this. And delaying it further only delays, our ability, as the previous speaker noted, to really move things forward. And obviously, as a housing organization, we're strongly in favor of maximizing as much housing as we possibly can on any and all sites available in the remaining, actually, infill and greenfield sites available here in the city of Sonoma. I mean, obviously, redevelopment costs are exorbitant, so trying to redevelop a site is costly and incredibly challenging. So trying to maximize the opportunities is really critically important. In terms of the in lieu fee, I am interested to see how the staff moves forward the Nexus study, and I really look forward to seeing that. And I'm grateful for them for working on this. I know it's been a bit challenging moving this vehicle forward. So I am very excited to participate in that conversation when it comes forward. And really, I guess my final comment would be, one of the things we're noticing, and I'm sure many of you have witnessed this in our community, is we're seeing a shift away from the brick and mortar. Unfortunately, as a consequence maybe of COVID, we've seen a lot of small businesses unfortunately shut down, and it's moved to an online platform. So it really begs the question, what does the future look like? Is there really a place for a lot of these mixed use properties, or should it be redeveloped into more housing? So just something to consider as we move forward. And again, thank you very much for the staff working on this, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Mr. Weeks. Anyone else on Zoom? All right, seeing no more public comment, the public comment section of the public hearing is closed. We'll bring this back to the council for action. Actually, we don't need action. This is just an introduction. Am I correct?
We would need a vote to
A vote to introduce. Thank you. Okay, well done. I would just like to make a comment, and that is that I'm a little bit, I'm totally in favor of moving forward. I was one of the people that spoke very clearly that we needed options, and we didn't have them before, and I'm glad we have them now, and I'm glad to hear from our good partners at MacArthur Place that they're happy with that. So I'm very happy with that, and I'm happy to introduce the ordinance as well. However, the off-site piece is a little bit of a concern to me, because if the issue is credit, I don't care who gets credit if we can build housing. We identified all those properties when we approved our our housing element, and as I mentioned at the time, we approved 400 odd potential properties, and we don't own a single one of them. So somebody's going to get credit, and I don't care who gets credit if we get housing built in Sonoma that can help alleviate our housing crisis and put some families into homes here. So I'm a little concerned about that, and I guess my question is, and I should have asked this earlier, I apologize, can we bring that portion back as a standalone addition to this at some other time after further review?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we get into the general plan, we're going to be digging into this issue in much, much more detail. And this amendment doesn't preclude someone from proposing off-site. If that is part of their project, I think we could still consider it that way. It's just not including it as a spelled out option. So it's not necessarily prohibiting it from being an option. It's just not explicitly listing it as part of the residential component.
I'm very happy with that answer. Thank you so much. All right, so we've taken questions and public comment. We're at the point we need a motion to introduce this ordinance. Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
Actually, I have a lot more questions, if you don't mind.
You want more follow-up questions,
Follow-up.
please. I had more, and so more came up. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you.
Yes, of course.
Item number one, 870 Broadway is not a commercial lot, it's a mixed use, correct?
Correct.
What is the implications of this document tonight on mixed use?
Let's pull it up. So the proposed language for mixed use is that a residential component shall be required, except in the following circumstances. So we have the replacement of commercial use and tenant space with another commercial use. We have additions to historic structures. So there was a commercial property there that was demolished. So there's an option for them to try to take an allocation for that. And I apologize for the formatting. It's very hard. Oh, you can't even see this, can you? There we go. You probably can't read it anyway. So the residential component, it's the same language. A residential component shall be equal to 100% of the floor area of the commercial component. So if the applicant came in and proposed a 50,000 square foot commercial development, the required residential component would be 50,000 square feet. They could either propose that on site, they could propose it off site, or they could request the use of the in lieu fee.
But you would subtract from that whatever commercial square footage had been there? Is that correct? Can you add that into the formula?
That would be an option, yeah, because there was the Truck and Auto facility was there originally. We might need to look into that in more detail about the timing of it, but.
Mr. Wellender?
Yeah, I've got several follow-ups. So what I'm hearing you is that we are now losing the distinction between mixed-use zoning and commercial, in that however they go, there needs to be an equal part of residential and commercial.
So that's how the existing ordinance is written. So they both currently state that the residential component should normally comprise at least 50%. So that's what it is in the existing.
Should at least, so when
should normally comprise at least.
That's subjective, and so that's what we're trying to get rid of. So
Yeah,
now we've
but-
gone from 50 to 100%.
So what we're going from is 50% of the total proposed building area to 100% of the commercial component.
But what I think was implied with the 50% of the commercial area was equivalent to the square footage of the building. I think that even though we may not have definitive, we don't have a definition, one might say that back in the day that was the intent was the square footage.
Yeah,
Would you
so
agree?
there was definitely a very heated debate at the Planning Commission about what that means, the 50% of the building area. Are we talking, 25% of the commercial project? Is it, if someone is proposing 100,
So if the applicant or the future applicant that's present in the audience today chose to build some additions from their current facility across the street, would those pieces be considered commercial?
Yes.
So if they choose to build 10 rooms, 1,000 square foot per room, that's 10,000 square feet, then they would be obligated to build 10,000 square feet of residential on that site, unless we support the idea of an in-lieu fee.
Yeah, so the intent behind that is, let's say that the development potential is 10,000 square feet total, based on FAR and site coverage. But they want to build, so 10,000 square feet total. And what it's trying to do is encourage the construction of the on-site housing. So if the commercial component was 50,000 square feet, then the residential component would only be 50,000 square feet. And so with the Planning Commission's recommendation, it's almost a penalty for doing 100% commercial. So for building that 10,000, it increases the requirement for the residential component.
But we've never had 100%. Well, wait, take that back. Did we have 100% commercial before?
In some circumstances, yes.
In some circumstances.
It's been, so for MacArthur Place has received waivers on their last 5 use permits for the residential component.
Correct. The last one, they ended up paying an in-lieu fee.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a conservative language to support the construction of the on-site housing is the way that the recommendation from the Planning Commission has gone into this current ordinance.
And I believe that what obligation, and maybe David Ruderman can answer this, what obligation do we have to accept the Nexus study fee? What if we feel that future on that the fee is too low? Is that just a recommendation? This is germane in terms of.
No, I understand, but go ahead, please, answer the question.
This council will have the discretion to decide on the fee. We will want to ensure that it's defensible, and so the Nexus study will assist with that.
Okay. Thank you.
And I would also add that I don't think it's unforeseeable for us to revisit the percentage as well when we get that fee in.
And maybe I'm just a slow study. Both Council Member Ding and Mayor had suggested that they heard options. I haven't heard options other than the in-lieu fee.
The options, no.
With the exception of the exceptions like the historic and that, but
Correct.
In terms of I think the request was options, and I'm not hearing them.
Correct. So what we're doing here is we're balancing the desires of the Planning Commission versus the desires of council, and staff is trying to go back and forth. So the original proposal that came before the Planning Commission a year ago was a residential component plan, and that was trying to think of the right word, rejected. The rejected was what I was trying to say, but I was trying to think of a polite term. So the Planning Commission rejected the idea, declined to forward a recommendation for the residential component plan. What staff did when staff came back to the City Council is we presented two options. We presented the recommendation from the Planning Commission as well as staff's option for a suite of options. The City Council then remanded the decision back down to the Planning Commission and directed the Planning Commission to come back with an option that had a suite of options. What is before you this evening is the results of that year-long negotiation process with the Planning Commission.
Without a suite of options.
Well, there's an option.
This is what has been recommended by the Planning Commission.
And I understand that, but I'm just trying to get clarity because
Correct.
what Councilman Ding had said, he had heard options, and I didn't hear the options.
Correct.
What we're hearing is what the planning is pushing.
There's two options. Well, I think the developers do have the option if they do want to propose offsite. There's nothing in this current language that would prohibit that. It's not necessarily facilitating it, but I don't believe there's anything in here that would prohibit it.
Or they could build the housing.
Or they can build the housing.
That's what I'm talking,
on-site.
that's what the option is.
Or
That's
they,
what
or they
the
can
option.
ask for a waiver, and the waiver
Right.
can either be complete or it could be a partial waiver, and it could include a whole payment of a fee or a partial payment of the fee, subject to the discretion of the Planning Commission.
And if I could clarify what I remember from our discussion is that there was no option before. It was simply you were going to build the housing.
It was either build the housing or we'll tell you you don't have to. And so
Right. So the options now, we have this process, which we're going to have a waiver fee study, which will be brought back here and for us to agree with the results of the study or not. And we have an option that is clear for the people who want to develop, that they can, if they want, build residential in, or they can go for the waiver process. We didn't have that before. That is the option that we were discussing, and I think it's come back pretty much, it took a while, but, good decisions sometimes do. Anyway, so to answer your question, I think we do still have options. It may not be a menu of options, like 25% this and 75% that or whatever, but it, as Ms. Tierney has said, it doesn't preclude us from entertaining those.
So I hear what you're saying, and yes, with that clarity, I do recognize some options. I guess one of the areas that I'm struggling with is that with this new proposal, what we're doing in my interpretation based upon what I learned in the 5 years of the Planning Commission, we are taking the red zone, which is commercial, and we're basically mushing it with the purple zone, which is of mixed use. And so we're really kind of losing what I call a commercial component. Or a commercial statement in our town. And that to me doesn't feel right. And that's why I am uncomfortable this evening to settle on what came back to us from the commission about the 100%. I also support you, Madam Mayor, as far as this idea of off-site. What the discussion was expressed by Ms. Tierney is that what's happening is that if they do an off-site development in a zoned residential place, we're not gaining per se. But my argument to that is that that site that they were able to now build on may not be built in our lifetime. And yet, so therefore, we're getting houses. So I don't quite buy into that argument that off-site development doesn't have some legitimacy. I know, too, that as much as the public had expressed a reluctance to continue this, it took 16 years for the bridge, and I understand I'm not advocating that we take that long for this. But again, based upon my perspective gained in the last 5 years, this warrants a little further discussion. And although it is comforting to note that we have an opportunity to revisit it with the update of the general plan, I've learned also that at times that when we are suggested that we have that opportunity down the road, it never materializes. So those are my comments. Oh no, last comment. Just to remind everybody, in this last cycle of housing, as much as we are to build housing, we met our obligation of housing in the city of Sonoma. So I do not feel guilty that we haven't produced housing in our town, and I want to reemphasize that to you because there is a legitimate, strong voice out there for more housing, but it's not like we haven't done housing. We met our cycle 5 requirement, and we should be pleased with that, not to sit on our laurels. We need to move forward, but sometimes it's implied that we haven't done anything, and I just want to dismiss that.
Very good. Any further comments?
May I?
Please.
Yes, I agree with you, the Councilmember Wallander. Yeah, I totally agree. We need a house. And the housing issue is the number one issue since 10 years ago in the Sonoma. We always talked about it. And we try to find a partnership with our local residents, business owners, and also developers. I was very impressed, the company, the CEO mentioned we want to build a world-class hotel and service. Yes, we can work together. We can work together and build and keep our Sonoma as a world-class town. So that any additional the inputs or your suggestions always welcome. I know in the next couple of the month you are working on fee structure, fee studies, basically on the cities and purpose just to serve the customer. On the local residents as customer, developer also as a customer. Sometimes we need to talk with them. Hey, how do you think? Do you understand in this way when we receive those kind of resident the components and everybody understand on the same page, and then win-win-win, three-win the situation. Thank you so much. And also, I would like to praise our the developer very much involved on the local community, and they help in the city to raise the money, and also invite our residents to become a part of our community. That is a very, very encouraging situation. So that we need to keep move forward, encouraging it. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ding. Ms. Farrar-Rivas.
Yeah, I understand what Councilmember Wallander is putting forward. I would be inclined to approve this for us to move forward, because I do believe, and I understand your concerns about that the can gets kicked down the road and then nobody ever picks the can up again. But it's my understanding, I could be wrong, that many of these issues are also part of our housing element, and so that once we hit the general plan, we're actually going to have to address these issues. And that by doing the waiver fee study that's going to happen, that will address one of these issues. It will then actually make sure that there is a number two option that is clear, that we know, okay, relative to what's happening, then there'll be $1 assigned to it, and then developers can come in and move forward and know that and my understanding in creating that formula is what will be best is you'll create a formula that will encourage housing to be built on site, but also will be developed in a way so that it will be beneficial for the developers to do development. So I think that's, there's enough interest in this area in our community and for the developers and the nonprofit developers in our community that want to see all of this get hashed out and complete so that we can now move forward and get the housing that we need. So I think that to me this is kind of a first step in moving it forward.
Mr. Willander, final comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we've submitted our housing element to HCD, so that's it. So we're not talking about the housing element. Now what we're talking about is when we move into the updating of the general plan, there may be that opportunity. And again, I am not opposing the idea of an in lieu fee. I like options. What I take exception to right now is I take exception to the percentages that have come before us, which is basically every square foot of commercial, you have to put a square foot of housing in. And that's where, again, I think, in my mind, we're losing some of what I call the context of a commercial district. And it's not that I don't believe that I believe there should be a housing component in commercial. I just think the one-to-one, I don't support. And that's what I support in lieu fees, and support on-site development would be great, but I take exception to the percentages. That's really what I was attempting to say.
Got it. All right. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that. So, you have another please.
Very simple. Just I want to clarify. In the future, that is the fees if we collect as an option. You have to make sure this is the fees just for the housing. And right now, I know we have an affordable housing trust fund. I'm wondering, this fund could be protected enough, because during the pandemic, during the Wi-Fi, some part of the money has been used for rental assistance. Of course, that is correct. But the money we collect from this kind of residential component is totally, we have the specific purpose, building the house. as not for other purpose. So that when you set up this account, be sure we got enough protection.
Yeah, I think the intent with the residential component fee is to bring it back to City Council for a study session first. And so we can discuss all of those issues in more detail and give that feedback to the consultant later in March. Would just like to take a moment to point out, so the council does have other options. If you would like to consider other options, we could return back to the 50% and do floor area. We're really talking 1-for-1 either way. So currently it's, we have the same standard for commercial and mixed use. I understand Councilmember Wellender's concern about maintaining the commercial corridor and the intent of our commercial district. And that's one of the reasons we're having to kind of kick the can down the line a little bit. One of the recommendations for the ad hoc was trying to do, 25% and 75%, but we can't do that within the confines of our existing general plan. So we'll definitely look into that in more detail. But the current language is 1-for-1, and that is the intention with the 100%. It's really just a different way of framing that 1-for-1. So the alternatives would be to go back and do 50% of the total floor area, or as proposed is 100% of the commercial component.
Understood. So we have before us to introduce the residential component, knowing that we have some things that will follow, including a fee study. And with that fee study, we can also talk about how those fees will be used at that time to answer Mr. Ding's concerns. I think that's appropriate when we talk about fees, as to discuss how many and where they go. I'd also like to point out that if the commercial component happens to, well, whatever it happens to be, if it's anything, it's going to produce sales tax for the city. And if it's a hotel, it's going to produce TOT tax for the city, which helps pay for our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So I don't want that to go unnoticed here, that not only do we have these in lieu fees, but we're also providing some structure for creating a business that also helps provide revenue for the city to be able to put towards housing. And that, to me, is a very important thing. Not to mention that it offers so much else to our city by bringing in people here who go to our museums and state parks and restaurants and so forth. So, yes, back to Ms. Ferrar-Rivas, and then we'll...
I have one other
Yes,
point
please.
of clarification, is that also what could happen is someone could decide, potentially, I'm going to do 50% of this in lieu fees and 50% billed. And then, so that doesn't mean it has to be 100%. There's other variables, and that could be suggested back to some, either way. And then the other thing I just want to say is that I lived in commercial property on the plaza and loved it. So it was a great space to live.
You were a teenager.
No, I wasn't. I was actually in my late 20s, early 30s. So
Yeah, that's
but I felt
teenager.
I felt like a teenager.
That is right.
But at the same time, that is often many of the people that are working in the city, and the type of living situation that they're looking for is something that is, the rent it's good rent, you're downtown, if you want to go to the bar, you don't have far to walk home, things like that. So anyway, but I think and it creates actually a pretty vibrant commercial area in other cities. I've seen that happen too.
So I'm hearing even more options. Wonderful.
It's great.
All right. Is there a motion to introduce this ordinance?
Let me put.
Mr. Ding, please.
All right. So I would like to make the motion to introduce an ordinance amending the Sonoma Municipal Code, amending the Title 19, Section 19 and 10, 020 BC residential component, and the Section 19.010 020 and the C, and then the This is my motion.
Is there a second to the introducing this ordinance?
I second.
Seconded by Ms. Farrar Rivas. Is there any questions regarding the motion? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll, please.
Councilmember Wellender,
No.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Councilmember Farrar Rivas,
Aye.
Mayor Lo.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 3-1-1.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Ms. Tierney, for the presentation and for the patience that this has gone through. And thank you to our business partners for coming tonight and expressing your opinions, very important. And it was a great conversation. And thank you, Mr. Wellender, for bringing up all those points, because I think that everyone will come away from this knowing that a good discussion was had by everyone, and everyone, you know, we were all heard. And more to come. Can't wait. All right. Okay, moving along. I'm going to open the public hearing on 8.2. Discuss, consider, and take possible action to introduce an ordinance amending the Sonoma Municipal Code, Title 19, Chapter 19.12, Streetscape, to add new sections 19.12.030, Fire Apparatus Access Road Standards, 19.12.010, Private Road and Driveway Standards, removing section 19.48.100 driveways, and amending chapter 19.92 definitions to align roadway standards with the California Fire Code as amended and adopted by the City Council, and clarify various definitions related to development projects, and finding the proposed amendments are exempt from California Environmental Quality Act. So, please, if we could have a staff report on this.
I feel like
We're back to you.
Yeah, I feel like I need to apologize every time you have to read one of my titles.
No, are you kidding? It's I'm just challenging myself to see if I can read it without glasses, you know? So I succeeded, I think. So
Thank
anyway,
you. Well,
please.
I already gave the background with SB 330 and trying to convert our subjective language to objective language. And the roadway standards is really one of the primary issues that we deal with when you're looking at a new development project. So we've been working with the Fire Marshal, Department of Public Works, the Building Department, and Code Enforcement to have a really comprehensive update to our parking code section. Back in February, a year ago, the Planning Commission recommended that a portion of that move forward and requested that section that we're discussing tonight be dealt with in more detail. So we worked on this for about another 6 months. So what is before the council this evening is a focused round of amendments to establish objective standards for fire apparatus access roads, private roads, and private driveways. And one of the changes is to move it. Right now, all of these standards are in our parking and loading section. It's just not super intuitive to look for roadway standards in a section titled parking and loading. So we're moving it up to streetscapes, and this will also really help move it up in the priority of how a developer is looking at our standards. And you really need to look at access before you look at things like hedges and fences and things like that. And this also will align with the California Fire Code, so it's going to make our fire marshal's life a lot easier. So this is just a little graphic to show you. So right now the standards are buried in 1948, so we will be moving it way up in the code to 1912. And hopefully that will make everyone's lives a lot easier. So right now it's a 1948-100. So you just wouldn't necessarily look way down there for something like a driveway standard. And we don't have specific standards for a fire apparatus road versus driveways. So we're adding new definitions for what a fire apparatus access road is. We'll have a clear definition for what a driveway is, as well as a clear definition for a private road. And I can pull the language up if council would like to look at it, but the intent this evening is to introduce the ordinance, and staff would return on March 1st for adoption. Available for questions.
Are there any questions of Ms. Tierney regarding this ordinance, this proposed ordinance? Mr. Wellender.
Could you go back to your first screenshot where it talked about collaboration? My question is, was there unanimity between Fire Marshal, DPW, Building Department, Code Enforcement, so that if the Fire Marshal says, I need 14 feet, we have 14 feet, or did someone come along and say, no, I want 16 feet, or is it all one happy party?
With the ordinance that is before you this evening, there was consensus on the standards.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Ron.
Are there any further questions of staff on this ordinance?
I know that's really busy.
All right, I'll turn this over to the public. Are there any comments from the public on this proposed ordinance? Any comments on Zoom? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing portion, turn it back to the council, and entertain a motion or further comments regarding this proposed ordinance.
It would be with pleasure to read this too long of description of what this ordinance is and make a motion that we adopted this evening or pass it on. It is to discuss, consider, take possible action on Municipal Code amending Title 19, Chapter 1912, Streetscapes to add new sections to 1912-030, Fire Apparatus Access Road Standards, 1912-010, Private Road and Driveway Status, removing Section 1948-100 Driveways, and amending Code 1992, definitions to align road standards and everything else to make it compliant and appropriate with CEQA. Is there a second? I'm sorry.
Thank you. And I take that as a motion to introduce that. Yes, so there's a motion to introduce. Is there a second? Okay, there's this motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Wellender?
Yes.
Councilmember Dean?
Aye.
Councilmember Farrar Rivas?
Aye.
Mayor Lowe?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
Excellent. There are no other regular items. You have before you for information only the commission and committee roster, and I would just note that we sent out a press release. We still had a few alternates and a traffic safety commission openings. Please, people, start getting some. That's all we hear about is traffic complaints, and no one wants to be on the committee. This is very concerning to me. So let's try to get some people on those so we can bring it back next time. And youth members. We had a lot of youth members that applied for they all want to be on the climate committee, but maybe we can move them around to some other things. So any other comments or questions regarding the commission and committee roster, which is an information item only? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn, which is non-debatable. So moved by Ms. Rivas, unanimous. We are adjourned.